Good evening. It's lovely to see you all here today. Let me invite Mr. Rajiv Mecheri, Director and Trustee of Chennai International Center, to begin the session.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see you all this evening. It's the 107th event of CIC, and we are at MSc after almost a year, I think. We're very happy to host the book launch of Food and Faith by Shoba Narayan. Through this book, Shoba takes us through her personal experience of faith through food, leading to the discovery of her own beliefs. Shoba will be in conversation with Priyadarshini Govind, noted dancer and former director of Kalakshetra. In this conversation with Shoba, Priyadarshini will bring out traditions, travel stories, and dance connections. With a warm welcome on behalf of the board of CIC, I wish to share a brief introduction about our guests for today. Shoba Narayan is a noted journalist and content creator. With a master's from Columbia University, she has been a journalist and columnist for 30 years, writing about travel, food, wine, culture, crafts, and relationships for national and international publications. She is the author of 5 books, has won a James Beard Award and a Pulitzer Fellowship as well. She has taught and lectured at universities in India and abroad. She is interested in Indian aesthetics and has researched its influence on jewelry, music, textiles, and scents. She has founded and co-created a website called Project Loom, which documents the weaving traditions of India. She is a bird watcher, wine lover, and a gadget geek. Her lifelong mission is to get fit without exercising and lose weight without dieting. Isn't that our ambition as well? Priyadarshini Govind, as most of us here would know, is the foremost Bharatanatyam dancers amongst the current generation. A dancer known for her adherence to tradition, Priyadarshini manages to seamlessly blend new choreography and tradition, thereby gently redefining the boundaries of Bharatanatyam repertoire. A graduate in commerce from the University of Madras, Priyadarshini holds a diploma in mass communication, but Bharatanatyam has been her first love ever since she was 6. Priyadarshini also underwent training in Kalaripayattu, the martial art form from Kerala, and Nattuvanganam from Kalakshetra, besides learning to sing. She has several performances, collaborative and commissioned works, productions, seminars, and awards to her credit. If I start listing them, it will be end of the evening, so I will skip that, Priya. Before I hand over the stage to our wonderful guest this evening, there is a special curtain raiser video by none other than Mrs. Prema Srinivasan of the TVS family. She is the author of the book Pure Vegetarian, an exemplar approach to the topic of food intertwined with faith. We are indeed thankful and honored to play her pre-recorded video. Over to you, ladies. Have a wonderful evening.
Namaste. I'm very happy to be here today. I met Shoba for the first time in New York in the year 2000, when she was a young woman with a baby daughter. I was struck by her sprightly intellect and interest in many subjects. She was already writing for various journals at that time. I am happy that she has been able to put down her experiences with different faiths in such an engaging manner in her new book, Food and Faith. The book Food and Faith by Shoba Narayan is Shoba's personal journey in faith. She writes how she gradually moved from a convent-educated girl, skeptical about her faith, of being a Hindu without understanding any aspect of her religion, to a person more aware of the rich depth and diversity of the Hindu faith, as evinced in a description of the myriad temples she visits. During the course of the book, the writer gives us a bird's eye view of the holy places of different religions and communities that she visits in an effort to understand them, and also hoping to understand her own stance to her faith. Interwoven through these descriptions are the questions raised about the different aspects and evolutions of various religions and her own self-questioning of her past ideas and present emotions. Narayan's background as a student of journalism in US and a contributor to many American newspapers and magazines, makes the book an easy read. The Indian pilgrim to many temples is probably aware of the mythologies surrounding these places, but to the uninitiated, there is a wealth of information about the temple lore in addition to the food distributed to the devotees. Shoba's writings include an appreciation of the various prasadams, the sacred offerings at the different temples that she visits, but doesn't include too many details, stories, or backgrounds about the food offered. An interesting piece of information that I could come by relates to the Ambalapura temple, famed for its pal payasam, the milk sweet that is offered to the deity there. I learned that at the final stage of the preparation of the payasam, when the milk has reached the right creamy consistency and when the sugar is to be added, the cook comes out of the kitchen and calls out to the Lord, Vasudeva. Only then is the sugar added as if it is blessed by him. Much of the book reads like a travelogue. Condé as traveller would surely have jumped at the chapter on the Ben Israelis. I wish to conclude with some small quotations from Taittiriya Upanishad. Annam na nindyat tadvratam, annam na parichakshita, annam bahukurvita, ahamannam, 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 ahamannadu, ahamannadu, ahamannadaga, stressing the sacredness of food.
I'm very happy that you all have come out during COVID. Priya and I got to know each other through this book, and we had decided that I would do a slide presentation before we launch into the Q&A. Shall I do that or yeah? On January 18th, 1 month ago, the Bale Muhurta happened at the Udupi temple in my state where I live now, in Karnataka. And what it is that every 2 years, the Ashtamathas who run the Udupi temple, they do what is called a paryaya, that they change, it's like a changing of the guard or a changing from one matha to another. So there are many phases to this. And the reason I'm telling you this is it brings up the first question that I went with, which is what is the purpose of the temple prasadams? Why do temples have prasadams? Well, one purpose is to preserve old varieties of rice, old varieties of paddy, old varieties of cooking, old varieties of vegetables that in this day of paneer butter masala we have forgotten. So the Bale Muhurta, 2 years before the Paryaya happens, which is a mass feeding in a scale that is hard to imagine, the temple plants the Bale's Vare for the Yelai. And then there is a Kattige Muhurta, which is the wood from local trees. Trees are planted. And they are continuously planted because for till today, wood is used for the cooking. And then there is the Akki Muhurta, which is 22 varieties of local rice are grown and used for the Udupi. And these are rice like Rajamudi, Padmareka, Gauri, Mattalaga, Rajakamala, Honnekattu. So these are 18 murras of rice were used for the Akki Muhurta. And the last one is the Batta Muhurta, which is paddy. So whether it is Jagannath Puri temple or Udupi Krishna temple or the goddess Madurai Meenakshi's temple, the temple kitchens, one of their main roles is preservation of cooking traditions that I won't even say are in danger of vanishing. They will vanish because the usage of these techniques, the usage of these vegetables don't exist. Then the second point, look at this old man. And I spoke to him. I interviewed him. He's in Udupi. I asked him, Aja or Tata, why are you doing this feeding? I've seen you every day. And he said in Kannada, he said, this is my life's purpose, serving the God. So for all of us rational people sitting in our high rises, faith can seem very distant, unnecessary. But in every temple that I visited, and I visited temples all across India, faith was an anchor for these people. And serving this Anna to the devotees, they genuinely believed that they were serving the Lord. And some of them were cast out by family, some of them, he said, I can't go to Kashi to die, so I am going to be under the shade of Krishna. So this is what he does. And the food that is used mostly is what in some Tamil households we call Shraddha Chamayal, which is no onion, garlic, English vegetables. Largely it is pumpkin. In Karnataka it is matta gulla, which is a type of a brinjal that is local and grown there. In Jagannath Puri the same pumpkins were used. So clearly and then the usage of the black urad dal, which is native to India. So and this is the akki in quantities like this. In whether you go, that whole belt, Sringeri, Dharmasthala, rice and saru and one vegetable, and it is delicious. So prasadam is the easiest way for a hungry person to access God. And in that sense, like these apps draw us in with the smartphones, God has invented a ritual to draw in the devotees through the stomach. And it works. From Udupi we go to Kashi, which was my favorite place. This is the Ganga. And this is Naga Baba. His name is Harinder Puri. And he said, I live in the Himalayas for 9 months of my life, and we are Naga Babas who are conscripted by the 8th century saint philosopher Shankaracharya to protect the Hindu faith. And again, for a rational person to hear him say it like he means it, with sincerity and with complete belief, is a bit overwhelming, because it is difficult to dismiss when 50 people you meet all say the exact same thing. So this is his role, and this is what he does. He does chai and he does charas. Charas is charas is chirut, and with ganja. So he says, I live off the land. I come for the kumbh every kumbh, and I will protect you. I will protect this Hindu faith. So that's what it is. And this gentleman is actually from Tamil Nadu. He has not missed a kumbh. He lost his son in a road accident. And I asked him, why are you here? And again, the same thing comes, is that faith is my anchor. When life throws you a monkey wrench from which it is difficult to recover, you choose faith, or you don't choose faith. A Sikh couple said the same thing. When they lost their child, they chose faith. So then the question is, why faith is answered with stories like this. This is Swami Abdesha Nanda, who I met in Kashi. He runs one of the biggest ashrams who I met in Haridwar. He runs one of the biggest ashrams in the Kankal neighborhood. And you see how he looks. And he has policemen behind him, gun-toting rifles. He has an entourage. So as a journalist, I went and stand in line. I thought, oh God, one more godman. He's going to, spout the line, and I'm not going to be impressed. And so he did that. And then he has, like a politician, he's catering to many platforms. He's catering to devotees who come. And I watched this. One woman walked up to him and said, Swamiji, I want to see Shiva. And he has to react to that and give her a proper answer. Then there are guests. Then he did one thing that made me warm up to him. He said, wait a minute. He stopped everything and he goes and he does to the Rudraksha tree, he does puja. And you can't see it because it's not a video, but he waters the plant, he throws the flowers, and then he prays and comes. And he literally hugs the tree, what we environmentalists call these days tree hugging. And I said, so what do you get out of this? Because clearly he was lost to the world. He achieved what this Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls the flow state and the transcendence. He said, if you touch the earth, if you use the flowers, if you use water, if you use your senses and you try to reach God, then you lose yourself. So for him, the senses and objects were a way for, and then of course you go to Har Ki Pauri and you see this. So there is this aspect of religion as well, which is the dirt and the jostling and everything. So religion to me is a dilemma, because on the one hand, it is very sensual. It involves traditions or agamas that link food, faith, objects, flowers. But on the other hand, it is full of hypocrisies. So my quest was to parse out this and figure out my relationship with faith. I think the reason why Hinduism survives like this in India is because the religion in India, and this is true for every religion, I shouldn't say Hinduism, because I find this to be true in Ajmer, which we will visit, and also the Bene Israelis, is that in India is one of the few countries which has an unbroken line of where the gods walk the earth. You go to Greece now, you don't see Zeus, you don't see the old Aphrodite, you don't see the gods. You go to Egypt, you don't see Ra, you don't see Akhmun-Ra. The old invented gods have gone. India, you still see avatars, or when avatars, they break through the clouds and walk the earth. And that's because it's linked so much to the arts, to aesthetics, and to life. The snake charmer image happened in Kashi. Prakrit, Sanskrit was the language of the gods. Prakrit is the language of the snakes. So I started wondering, why are Nagas so much a part of India? India was once the land of the snakes, and Prakrit is called the language of the snakes. So the snake charmer told me that, and I didn't believe him, and I discovered William Olet, American trained writer, has written this book called Language of the Snakes. And then this is, of course, Ma Ganga, who is as dirty in a chemical composition way, but at the same time, the power of faith makes people submerge into her bosom every day. And that gives me the concept of Pavitrata and Gandagi. So she's dirty, but she's also pure. So this is that Ganda Berunda that we all have in India, that Irutalai Pakshi, we can see two sides and live with the contradictions. This is Ajmer, the Dargah, where they call it Ganga Jamuna Sanskriti. You can Hindus and Muslims and all faiths go to it equally. And this is the Prasad there, and the Badi Deg and the Choti Deg. And it was started by Shah Jahan, and then started by Akbar, and then continued. Akbar said, if I win the battle of Chittorgarh, I will come here and offer it. And he did. He walked to Ajmer. Ajmer is special because the prasad is made with the view of offering to a beloved. They call it Urs. And that means it is somewhat like the Srirangam temple, where the Andal wanted to be merged with the beloved. Here I found that they want to be merged with the beloved by marriage. So the yearning and the longing is not of the god, it's of the beloved. That's what they call it. And of course, again, the sensual experience, the Desi Gulab everywhere. And you go in and it is like Guruvayur, where you are jostled, where you are handled for the best VIP darshan and everything. So these are the contradictions that are implicit, whether it was Christmas in Goa at a church, whether it was in Ajmer, whether it was at a temple. And like the Irutalai Pakshi, we all have to hold both sides. This is outside the Ajmer Dargah, where there was a wonderful Qawwali performance. And look at this. This is in the Deg, and every aspect of the human yearning is visible here. You have cradles for babies, you have money, you have somebody wants a watch, somebody bells, houses. So what do you clutch when all is lost? You clutch your faith. And now we go to Patan in Nepal, and this is Buddhism, and this man in the red is a Rinpoche. He's actually quite famous. He has a center in Stanford University where he is involved with. So he was there to make a film about a Dakini. And I said, what is a Dakini? And he said, the Dakini is a very rude goddess. And you have all these yoginis and Dakinis in Nepal. And his film was called a dying man. His film story was a dying man had to go and find a Dakini in order to live. That was the theme of his film. And this is Patan, or Lalitapura as it was called. And Rinpoche was explaining to me about the Yogini worship that was part of ancient India. Chinnamasta is one. She cut off her head and danced on a corpse. And she said, you know why in Navratri you do all this giving of the bangles and the mirror and the comb to these women? We have that in common, because for a Dakini, in order to get her Kadaikan Parvai, or the beneficial gaze, you give her an object and you say, you are the queen of my heart forever and ever. I said, come on, I'm not going to say that. He said, no, whenever you find female energy, you have to give in order to get the grace. So that, in order to get the grace. So this is a Kumari. Nepal has many Kumaris. This was the one in Patan. And I took a Horlicks dabba for her because she likes Horlicks. And what my takeaway from this trip was the tradition that my mother does. And she said, in Ippola nee vandu this valayella vanda, lipstick madri kudu for Navratri. So move with the times kind of thing. So this is the Kumari and my guide who took me to her. And this is the male dancers on the Navratri, dressed as women goddesses. And the whole community has come together to feed them. And we all partake of the food after that. And then I'll quickly go through the rest. This is Mathura, of course, the famous Pedas. And I end in Ambalapura, which Prema Aunty was talking about, the Vasudeva worship. The Palpayasam of Ambalapura. And this is a Tirumeni, that's what the priests are called. And he was the one who went out and called for Vasudeva before pouring in the sugar. Next to, near Ambalapura is Kottarakara, where the Unniyappams are, or the, what we call the, what do we call, Neiyappams are made. And this is the temple. So to me, what I discovered was that aesthetics and faith are very intertwined all over India. This is Parani, and here this woman was doing an Anga Pradakshanam. People are walking up the hill and praying for various things. So the Tiviram, or the intensity of the desire or the need, was very touching to me. And nowadays in Parani, they don't touch the Panchamrutam. They use the Malavarapuram. And then they have entirely, it's all, nobody touches it. And this was made very clear to me. I mean, they said even these women only wrap it up. So a friend said she had a problem eating the Panchamrutam because you're worried. They said in the past they used to stamp on it. So now they don't. And I want to end with some faces that are lost. This is the Ajmer, the man who actually makes the Kesariya bath. And this is a woman in Ambalapura temple who is kind of lost to the world. And this is in Parani. And this is in Nepal. And this is my daughter on the Ganga. So with that, I just wanted to give you a flavor of the book and the places I visited before talking to Priya, so you have something to remember. Come.
I want to tell you that I really enjoyed reading the book. And it speaks about so many elements. There are so many elements in it about, of course, faith, food, of course. But you talk about the historical context of the temples.
Yeah.
The mythological stories, not just of our land, but also those outside, from other cultures. And local beliefs. Then food that is not just sacred, but the local specialities. And then there are personal anecdotes, introspection on religion, on faith, on rituals. It seemed like a very sensorial and, as you said, a very sensual journey. Hearing the sounds, taking in the aromas of the place, seeing the imagery, and the descriptions of the delicious food. I love the conversational tone, the humor, the way that you that you had the statistical and the scientific facts along with the intuitive beliefs and the mythology. It is in first person, yes, but sometimes I get the feeling that you're looking at the whole thing from the outside with a sense of irony, curiosity, and wonder. As a Bharatanatyam artist, there were so many passages in it that were really something that I immediately connected with, especially the idea of looking at God as the beloved in the Ajmer section. This is about when the Sufi dancers, where the relationship is very intimate, very intense and private and personal. We have compositions in dance, and if there are any dancers here and those who watch a lot of dance performances, most of the themes are about heroines pining for their beloved, and these beloveds are usually a deity. To explain this concept, not just to today's generations, but to those who are unfamiliar with this, and make it relatable and relevant is a real challenge. So reading about your experience of it was very interesting and immediately relatable. And words where religion and faith is seen as transcendental, the word abandon and surrender, which I think as artists we are hearing all the time. And seeking an alternate state of consciousness is so true for the arts, isn't it? And I think in page 71, if I may, where you speak about the whirling dervishes, yes. And you say they have been channeling the divine through dance ever since. Of course, this is a continuation of a paragraph. Scholars say that one of the purposes of the whirling is to induce altered states of consciousness, which you could argue is the purpose of all religion. Also, when you say this, talking about the Sufi, the Sufi, you call them? Sufi saints, yeah. They sit cross-legged and pray, using their hands to express the strength of the feeling. They aspire towards rapture, to forget the self. I mean, this, I think, is very true of the arts, because this is what music and dance aspire to do, isn't it? And also there's a very interesting passage about the description of the temple. And this is in page 147. Because there you speak about the Hindu temples not only house God, they are God. And the figure of God makes up the architecture of the temple. The sanctum sanctorum, also called the Garbhagriha, is the most sacred spot in the temple and denotes the Godhead. So you describe the different parts, the parts of God, and compare it to a temple. And I'm sure you've heard about it. There is also a very similar comment or a quote by the great legendary Balasaraswati, T. Balasaraswati, where she compares the repertoire of Bharatanatyam to the temple. And she says the Gopuram is like the Alaripu. So these are all compositions in a repertoire. And because of the content of these compositions, she compares them to the journey of the devotee into the temple as he or she enters the temple. So the Gopuram is the Alaripu, which you watch from the outside. The Ardhamandapam is the Jatiswaram, and she goes on like that. It's very interesting because the content of each is compared to the energy of each of the spaces that she speaks about as you enter the temple, as you go towards the Garbhagriha. So it was very interesting for me to read about that. And the last one, she says that the Tillana is like the final burning of camphor. So what a beautiful concept, isn't it? And what I especially loved is the conversation between you and your mother. I thought it was something that was really, yeah. My mother calls, I'm reading out, my mother calls prayer bhavane or imagining, which is like art, which is dance, isn't it? In her view, This play acting, decorating the idol, putting it to bed, reading the accounts to an all-knowing God, nudges the devotee closer to an understanding of divinity. Do you think you are like the Buddha? She asked me one day. Do you think you are so evolved that you can simply sit down and realize God? The average devotee needs lots of props. I think that's so evocative and it speaks for all of us. So, let me go to the questions. The book to me reads like a spiritual journey, if I can say that. When you look back, can you share a few thoughts about it that you may or may not have included in the book? I know you have given a bit of a view into the book,
Yes.
but if you can share a few thoughts that you may or may not have included in the book.
Yeah. So many, but a key thought is, does religion have an expiry date? In other words, will there come a time when it becomes irrelevant? And the logic of the thought was that in China, 90% of the population call themselves atheist. Japan, 87%. Scandinavian countries, 85%. So I saw a link between developing economies, wealth, and an absence of God. The most devout countries are Ghana, Zambia, Gabon. So I thought to myself, does religion have an expiry date? Will it become irrelevant? And what will take its place? India and Thailand are anomalies because here only 15% of the population call themselves atheist. So then the question becomes, what links faith to a population? And I think in India what happens is that for whatever reason, it is so woven, like Priya pointed out, with every aspect of our life, that it's going to be very hard to give it up. It's hard to unravel. It's like a pinnal kolatam. It's linked to the arts, it's linked to textiles, it is linked to jewelry, it is linked to ritual in our daily life. And so religion, I think for that reason, and of course the prasadams, will not become irrelevant in India. So that was one question that I had, and I did not include in the book because I didn't have an answer to it, whether India will become like one of these developing economies where the population has no link to faith. So that I gave out. And I would love for you, from a dancer's perspective, Priya, to show us, if you can, about how I've watched you, I've watched Bharatanatyam, but I don't recall how prasadams and food offerings are done to the god, and in terms of what mudras are used. And if you would grace us with a few mudras that is used specifically in your dance to offer as offering, that would, at some point, that would be really nice as well.
Actually, you have the Mushika Vahana, which is the verse on prayer on Vinayaka, where we talk about the Motaka Hasta,
Yes.
the Hasta that holds the Motaka, right?
Yes.
So, do it like this. And when you offer something, you offer like this. When you take it, you can take it like this. And prasadam could also be flowers, if not just food. And this is a way of prayer. And when we do Annapurneshwari, right?
Yes.
It's that spoon that you use. And this is the, what is it that she holds? Like an urn. Right?
Yeah. That.
And this is how she, it's what we do in life.
Yes.
But a very aesthetic version of it, I
Yes.
think.
Thank you.
As a dancer, one of the elements that we keep in mind when we are visually composing a piece is what we want the audience to hear, see, feel, etc. Do you go through this process as an author? Or if you do, what is it? How would you like this book to read?
That's a very good question. I think dance and stagecraft, theatre, are very immediate because you have your audience in front of you, the performing arts. writing and Netflix and movies are where you don't have the pleasure of your audience. So in a sense, you are writing for an imagined God or an invisible audience. And I would be curious, and I would ask you back of how you, how do you do what you just said? So is it regional? So in Chennai, you choose certain pieces. In North India, you choose certain pieces. Whereas for writing, it is it is dissonant. The act of creation is very removed from the act of presentation. Whereas for you, it's right there. So how do you think about what you choose?
Yeah. I understand that, of course, you don't instantly have the audience response, but definitely you'll have an audience in mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, who you're reaching out to, isn't it?
So for this book, it was the younger generation. It was our children, because a lot of them have no link or all of us, it was cool to be an atheist when you're in your 20s. So I decided deliberately to take a very light tone, a conversational tone, rather than making it a more and more. The desire is, when you do all the research, is to keep adding. So in a sense, it was parsing away stuff that doesn't need to be there and putting the essence of it. So it was more of a curatorial exercise of what to leave out as much as what to put in. And also try the humor. So in that sense, the imagined audience was people between 20 and 30 years old. That was a conscious decision.
So this book is about so much more than just faith and food, right? It's about, as you said, there's so much of research that has gone into it. It's also a very, you said you've kept a deliberately conversational tone. In a way, you've answered my question, whether the structure is deliberate or did this evolve naturally? I mean, was it organic? Did you start out, deciding that this was what your focus was going to be, or the way you looked at this subject was going to be?
So there were a few big misses. I desperately wanted to include Christianity because I thought it would be inclusive. But in Bangalore, for instance, you have the Feast of Saint Mary. So I thought immediately, okay, there you go. This must be linked to Prasadam, or my version of it. But it isn't. And it seemed facetious to just include it for the sake of including it. But then I went to Goa, and I spoke to Mario Miranda, the late, great Mario Miranda. And he said, even though Portuguese is my mother tongue, and I grew up in Goa, I still give 2 bales of paddy for our local Devi temple because it was promised by my ancestors. So in that sense, but there were some big misses. Tirupati Laddu is Tirupati is what I call a rock star temple. Srinath Ji in Nathadwara is a rock star temple. I wanted to include the Himalayan belt, Vaishno Devi, or the Badrinath, Kedarnath. But I visited Nathadwara probably 4 times, and I could not speak to the priests. Tirupati, I went with Gopal, but that was after the book was written. So access, ability to speak the language, ability to access the priests. So in that sense, and the Jainism, there are the, I wanted to include a temple because they do have that as well. So in the structure of the book, some part of it was, let's do north, south, east, west. Let's see which temples are able to call to me, and let's leave the rest for the next bit. So,
yeah. But I find the conversational tone most engaging, and as you said, it's also a way to reach out or make it relatable to the young generation today, and also the fact that it's laced with humor. It's not heavy, and the facts just slide in without you really like the laddu with ghee. Yeah, I know. So, but I'm just curious. Is it why are the priests in Nathadwara inaccessible?
Because there is no routine. It is he's a infant, so they say that he will sleep when he likes. He will be fed when he likes.
Okay.
So as you read, Priya, these priests are very busy people. to have them have the patience to talk to you is not an easy task. I found it in the Aragar Kovil that we'll hopefully speak about, but the Nathdwara, coupled with the fact that I don't speak the language, and the fact that he's a whimsical god. So, you'd make an appointment and the guy wouldn't show up because the god needed to be taken care of. So
I'm also curious about Kumari, the Kumari you met.
Yes,
isn't it? So it's a concept that even we, who are part of this, we understand it at a superficial level, I think. But just the concept of a young girl suddenly raised to this stature of divinity, and people much older than her prostrating before her. How do they react? I mean,
I think they are groomed for it. She came and her father was carrying her when we went to visit, and then she sat down and didn't reveal much. And I said, how was she chosen? And it's sort of, the Kodimaram is picked because it has certain Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma.
Correct.
And you choose a tree based on that. Kumari has certain markings which make her the Kumari. And
what happens when she grows up?
They find another Kumari. Again,
and
like Pariyaya.
What happens to her?
Oh, she can lead a normal life. She can get married, and
that'll be a great shift in her
thinking,
isn't
yes,
it?
Indeed.
So,
and I can't decide whether it is like the ordained monks who get chosen. The Dalai Lama, who I interviewed, told me that it is both a gift and a burden. And for her too, it is a gift and a burden to be chosen to that. And people see it as dharma, as their duty, and they, I think, internalize it. And she is young enough. She may not realize it's what dharma means, but she's told this is your path and you are so lucky to be doing this. And she does it.
So I think a lot of it is conditioning, isn't it?
Conditioning, yeah.
Can you speak about a few of the temple towns that you feel were special, very different?
Yeah. So I would like to show the Harmandir Sahib, the Gurudwara, the Golden Temple. And as I talk, he'll play some slides. I found this to be special because I didn't understand the Sikh prayers. In South India, when I go, Hara Haro Hara, I know the words, I know how people pray, and some of it becomes intrusive after a while. Whereas here, the people were just murmuring to themselves, and any religion that worships a book, to my mind as a writer, is a fantastic religion. And I met, on the road to the temple, I met a American-born Sikh having an argument with his father about why should I come here on this pilgrimage when I can worship from home. But the reason it touched me was because I was able to commune on an energy level. I don't want it to make it sound so la la land or something, but because I didn't understand the language, it was just feeling the energy, and it gave me a lot of peace. So I think as a dancer, you work with energy, and I would be curious to ask you, Priya, if what energy is associated most with worship? I mean, I guess in the Navarasas, what would be the one that is most associated in your mind?
So, actually, dance itself is a form of worship, isn't it? And as I said, the relationship that you share with the deity through the compositions is a deeply personal, intense. And as you work, you're working with these kind of compositions all the time.
Yes.
So the deity itself, or the deity, becomes a personal god, rather than something which you only feel bhakti towards.
Yes.
So the aspect of Shringara, or love, is a form of bhakti, especially through dance. And so Shringara would be one way of offering.
Yes.
And of course, what we all aspire is peace.
Yeah,
Shanti.
But this Harmandir Sahib, the scale, I mean, Udupi is Anna Brahma. This is operating at a different scale, where I was told the dal gets piped in from a kitchen far away, but at the same time, you have these businessmen who are washing vessels so the sublimation of the ego, Karseva, happens. and the women making rotis. I think the egalitarian spirit and the simple scale of the langar feeding was stunning to watch.
Sometimes we have preconceived ideas about the temples, about some of the temples or the temple towns, because of what we've read or heard. But when we actually go there, it's different from what we've imagined. Did you have any such experience?
Yeah, I would like to show the Aragar Kovil one. So first of all, I wasn't planning to go to the Aragar Kovil. I wanted to go to Madurai. I wanted Madurai Meenakshi to be in the book. So I go there, and the gentleman there says, "Ninga enamma inge vandirkel. You go to Aragar Kovil, avaroda dosa ninga sapta, you shouldn't miss it." So I went there, and I want to start with this video. This is a priest whose name is Madhavan.
Has taken the Simhavadara to protect Dharma in our Bharat. All saints and Brahma, the Devas, Brahma, Shiva, Indra, and 33 crores of Devas requested Lord Mahavishnu to protect Dharma from Hiranyasura, from the dangerous event of Hiranyasura. இரணியனுடைய கொடுமையாலே கஷ்டப்பட்ட தேவர்களும் முனிவர்களும் பகவானை பிரார்த்திக்கிறார். பகவான் என்ன பண்றார்? திருக்கோஷ்டியூர் தான் நரசிம்மாவதாரம் பண்றார். அதை மெயின் பண்ணுவோம். அப்பதான் இந்த ஊருடைய கண்டினியூஷன் வரும்.
So it's like being in your green room and whether you would allow. So he was very busy, like I said. He said, "Amma Sandhyavandanam pannittu na vandu thiruneer pottukren, neenga appo vandu pesunga engitta." That's the only time I have, and this was 7 p.m. and his day hadn't ended because the Utsava Murti was going on the Valam of the Oor. So but he ends his day at 11 p.m. and starts at 3 a.m. and gets paid very little. So all my self-righteous thoughts about these money-grabbing pandas of Jagannath Puri or the priests kind of fell a little bit, because essentially they are ambassadors and politicians. Somebody wants a VIP darshan, somebody wants a date kurchified for the marriage of their daughter. So then he sets me up. I said, "I'm here to write about the dosai." So he sets me up and I go to the, I said, "Why is it called dosai?" He said, "Tirmal Vade Madri, but it's a bigger Tirmal Vade." So that's what it is. And the offering of the dosai is about the size of a tire, and along with pulishadam and everything. And it's so tasty. It was because it's a savory prasadam. And the people who make it, where they were singing and bhajanai and content. So then the question is, Priya, whether we believe that the sattvic food and the temperament that is in the cooks is passed on to the food. As a food writer, I have visited French restaurants. I have been to the back in America and Europe. The kitchens of restaurants people are cursing, people are mad, yelling at each other, and the food that comes out is very tasty. But sattvic food is not about taste alone. It is also about the energy of the preparer and the energy of the food. How light it is, how quickly it transmits to your body, and the temperament of the people who make it as an offering. That is why I think prasadam is special, because Nevedyam becomes prasadam only after the benevolence of the divine is touched on the food. And you see the love with which it is made, and I truly believe it is transferred to us. So that was a very unusual one. And there are others. The other one was Jaipur. North Indian temples have a very sensible arrangement where the Bhagacharta, which is the entrance, is huge. So when he shows the Jaipur one, everybody can see it. It is not like Payani, where you're like Randi, Jaragandi, or Kalahasti. So everybody is standing there. and they pray to the god by raising their hands and sort of rocking back and forth. And I wish I had met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because there are photos of him in all the temples that I visited, from Jagannath to this Govind Devji temple of Jaipur. Because one of the things, and look at this prasadam. This is every day some variety of sweets. And this is for Govind Devji temple in Jaipur. All of Jaipur congregates here at 7 a.m. to pray and partake of the laddus and the pedas and everything. And then you go outside, of course, you see women lost and in their duty to God, making these garlands. And then you visit another, there are the many Krishna temples in Jaipur, and then there is a dholak and the women doing bhajane and everything. So the art, I would love to know your definition, but art is something where you forget yourself. And I believe that the singing and the dancing that these women displayed made the viewer forget herself and the person doing it forget. So I think that is a very good, the Brahmananda Sahodaram Cholrali, that's what I saw in Jaipur. So this was an unusual temple. And I would love to ask you, Priya, when you're on stage, are there moments of this transcendence? Because I imagine you have a lot going on in your head. And do you do the performance? What is the attitude? Is it of offering, or is it like me, which is that I am here speaking to somebody and I have to figure out what the audience would like to hear? So what is your mood, and do you achieve transcendence when you dance?
So we all aspire to. Right. The thing is, in a dance performance today, the audience is in the dark, so you really can't see anybody. So it's not about seeing an audience, but feeling an audience, right? And the whole idea of dance is to integrate in your mind all the different elements, whether it's the music, it's the lyrics, it's the movement, and it's what the composition is about. So everything you're integrating in your mind, and you are communicating visually, like you would do a translation. When you translate from one language to another, it is like you take the essence of that and you translate. You're not translating the word to word, right? So similarly, we are visually translating, whether it's a written word or the sung melodic word, etc. So what we are doing is bringing to life a visual poem, and where none exists on stage, the props are the dancer, the characters are played by one dancer. So you're literally, the canvas is the stage, and you're visually creating a scene over there, which has to be made alive for the audience. So that's the integration. You're projecting an image from your mind so that it becomes alive, it comes alive for the audience. So in that process, and it's all about rasa, our Indian arts, isn't it? So what you are evoking is a sense of experience of that situation, which you want the audience to feel. And that response of the audience is then, what you get back. And it's really cyclical. I mean, it sounds, it's all instantaneous. And it's that moment that you're looking for, where actually, in that moment, the audience and you are one, and time stands still. But that transcendence happens, sometimes doesn't at all.
Yes,
so,
yes.
yeah. You were talking about the women stringing a garland outside. In the South Indian temples, I was told, see, in the early days, we club all the women who danced and sang, who were from that community, as Devadasis. But there were many, there was hierarchy, and they were called by different names. Today, we call them Devadasis, but they were called by different names. And there were women who only, their duty was to wake the deity, wake up the deity in the mornings with song and dance. They did nothing else. There were women who would carry the kumbam for the deity. There were women who would string garlands. They would do nothing else. So there were many kinds of functions these women performed. They say that some of the women now who are who are stringing garlands outside, who are selling flowers, are probably from those families where the women whose function it was to give the flowers or to provide or garland the deity. So we have lost that ecosystem, though if we really look hard, some of them, the remnants of it still remains. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Shoba, is something when I really admire your sense of adventure, because when you speak about tasting all the prasadams, not just the prasadams, but also the local food in very simple places. I don't know how many of you, I'm actually quite embarrassed and ashamed to admit that when I go to a temple and I receive the tirtham, there is a big struggle whether I should swallow it or not. Right? So I really admire your sense of adventure. Did you at all go through this?
Yes, I think all of us, especially with COVID, go through this, and it happened a lot in Parni, because you know why the Parni idol is special? Because it has 4,488 they call it Nava Pashanangal, 9 poisons, but the idol is made of 4,488 herbs. So it's a Siddha temple. Patanjali is a Siddha, and he has a shrine in Parni. So they told me, Amma, don't get this Panchamritam which is not touched by hands. Ninga Abhisheka Panchamritam vangikungo, because that goes over the idol. So I thought about what you just said, which is that, they're pouring this and somebody's using their hands and putting it, and it's sold separately. Should I taste it? I too am ashamed to say whether, but the belief is that this Abhisheka Panchamritam has the Siddha strength that the Murugan idol has. It is congealed in that idol. So yeah, that was the one temple where this, what you said, came.
It's about faith.
It's about faith, yes.
You have crisscrossed to the country, not just as a tourist, not just on a pilgrimage, but with a very focused sense of purpose. When you look back at the experience, can you just sum it up? Like these in 3 words.
Yes. I would say don't underestimate the power of ritual. That would be how I would sum it up. And I find it, if I can expand on 2 lines, I find it very fashionable nowadays for everyone to say, oh, I'm spiritual but not ritualistic. I have flipped and I'm saying that rituals are not one of the paths, are the path to transcendence. Because it gives you punctuation, it gives you pause, it gives you objects and usage of senses. So one sentence means don't underestimate the power of ritual.
Yeah, but I think one of the challenges is, our inquiring mind questions whether we're doing the ritual properly.
Yes.
Right? I think that becomes an issue. So whether it means anything at all if I do it like this. Yes. Maybe there's the right way of doing it, and who is going to teach me that, isn't it?
So the 2 words, one word you said, the bhavanai, which is imagination, and sharanagati are the 2 words that are needed in order to engage with ritual, which is those 2. Bhavanai leads to imagination, which is very useful to both of us.
Yeah.
And sharanagati is a good thing to have for life, when the samatvam.
You have spoken about faith, belief, religion, but one word I actually quite struggle to translate when we try to explain it to children or young people, even older people who are not from this culture, who have not grown up in this culture, is sacred, right? So sometimes you wear a thread and then you're trying to explain to them why that thread, which looks probably, why is it so important? No, it's sacred. So how do you explain the word sacred or translate?
That's a very good question. So I drink wine. Let me tell you an analogy that may not be so spiritual. I think sacred is a word that is somewhat like what the French use, this word terroir, which is to suggest that the flavor of the wine comes from the terroir. And it's almost meaningless because terroir means the soil, it means which side of the slope the wine is the grapes are grown, the kind of production that is used. In Sanskritam, which I'm a very, very beginning student of, if you look at sacred, everything is but sacred in India is not meaningless. It is very contextual. So a muhurta is a sacred time. Vedas are sacred oral traditions. Agamas are sacred instructions. The Brahmanas are sacred written works. Punya is a sacred kalam or a period of time. There are Tulasi is a sacred plant, but there is not only one Tulasi, there is Madhavi is called Tulasi. Lotus, there are lotuses, but there are sacred lotus has a specific name. I think it is Hemangini or something. So sacred is an action, time. Agnihotra is a sacred act. Yantra is a sacred diagram. So sacred is meaningless. It is how you use that in context that makes it. So sacred is a very meaningful word in India. The word sacred in English is a very poor translation. Because just like Eskimos are supposed to have some million words for ice, and fisher folk have 36 words to describe the color blue because of the sea. We have, in indigenous languages, and particularly Sanskrit, there are many words for sacred. And it depends on place, kala, nera, sandarpam, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very rich word for which the English word is a very poor translation.
I quote, religion is, you say in the book, is the human search for answers. So what were your questions?
And I'm going to ask you the same thing. What are your questions for dance? My questions are, it's the questions that all of us have. Why are we here? What is our purpose for life? So if you divide, just as you have your rasas, we have the body, the mind, the heart, and the soul. Body, you talked about yoga. It is hygiene. It is what we call plumbing. It is stuff that we do. For the mind, the cerebral aspect of life is very rich in today's culture because we can take classes on Zoom, we can attend workshops on Zoom, we have technology that opens up libraries to us. The heart, I believe, is only by watching you dance, Priya. The engagement of live performances enriches the heart in a way that you can't do through Zoom. I think the ideas I get when I watch you dance or listen to somebody sing, it sparks the mind, it sparks joy. So the heart, let's say it's taken care of if you engage with the arts or see a painting or see a sculpture or how do you deal with the soul and the spirit? How do you deal with big questions like, why did my father die? How am I going to die? And what if something bad happens? Why am I here? I honestly cannot think of another way except faith. And the fact that it was invented by humans in all cultures, all faiths are very similar because they aspire to answer these big questions. And so I think that you have to figure out how to make peace with your connection to the divine, whether it is through nature worship, whether it is through traditional choice of religion, whether it is through yoga or Vedanta or meditation or the Headspace app. You have to make peace, you have to figure out how to engage with your soul. And I think there is no other way that I can think of that I like the religion. I finally made peace with my religion. So, but I'm going to turn it back to you to say, why are you dancing? I mean, what do you get out of it?
Yeah, actually, frankly speaking, I have tried to move away from it many times in my life. So there were times when I said, okay, I've had enough. I think that's enough. But I've always come back. And even now, after Kalakshetra, I thought I've had enough of performing. I've had enough, I engage with this art field in a different way. But the fact that though I don't perform as earlier, I think something draws you, and I think it's that sense of transcendence that you feel, that where you aspire to be like the camphor, where suddenly this gross body doesn't exist and there's only that spirit that you try to connect with, and you connect in a similar manner with the audience. So I think that elusive kind of exhilaration that you feel sometimes and sometimes you don't, and that sense of what do you say, though I sound a little crazy, dancing out of your body, that aspiration, I think that's why I keep coming back to it. Yeah.
There's this artist, I think Alvar Balasubramaniam, I think, who made sculptures out of camphor, isn't it? Huh? So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I would like to throw if there are any questions from the audience.
Taking us through this delicious journey of Kovil Prasadams. But one question which has been intriguing me for several years is that in a typical temple, and particularly on very special festivals, Samprokshanam and very related type of festivals, there are two types of prasadams which are offered. One is the Kovila Naivedyam Panni, and the prasadadukku vara மக்களுக்கு கொடுக்கறது அது ஒரு ரொம்ப விசேஷமான பிரசாதம். Parallelly என்ன நடக்கிறதுனா, இந்த அன்னதானம்னு ஒரு தனி queue, the entire village creates an annadhanam festival on that day and people really flock for that. The faith there seems to be more than the faith here, or maybe equally distributed. Yes. Is there a faith angle to it, or what is the linkage between the two?
Yeah, I think you hit it, because I think one of the questions that I wonder is always, our temples have adapted a lot to technology. You can see Siddhivinayak Aarti by Zoom if you want. You can order a homam in your name by email. People in America can get prasadams. But this prasadam matram the kovilla vittu kudukka mattengra. They don't change tradition. So then if it's a finite resource, how do you make it available in scale, to use your business jargon? I think Annadhanam was a good compromise, where there is a finite resource of finite number of priests of certain class, certain caste, who will make it for the gods, and it's not available to everybody. So parallel, let's do this. I think it's a good jugaad, to use a business term. It's a good adaptation. But one adaptation that the temples don't do, and I can't figure out whether it's good or bad, is they don't give up these traditions. They don't. For example, one question was, why do they still cook in wood fire in this time of environmental sensitivity? Why can't they use the gas stove? Now, I don't know if I can't make up my mind if that preservation is good or bad. And I think it's an ongoing thing.
I'm just curious about the recipes that are used for these prasadams. Is anything written down? How are these transmitted? How old are they? And how unchanged have they been from?
Yeah.
And who gets to decide? Who gets to?
So Kamini, the answer is it's oral tradition, I think. But that said, the Ambalapura Palpaisam is not a complicated recipe. And if you ask them, they will very easily tell you. They'll tell you the quantity. Parni Panchamritam too, he wrote it down and gave me. So it's not a secret. I think though, it is, to use Priya's word, it is sacred only if it is done in a certain way by certain people at that temple. So they don't mind. In Jagannath Puri, the Chappan Bhog was, pumpkin and dal and some sweets and everything. You ask them, they give the recipe. And it's unchanging. That is the thing. But they believe if you do it there with a certain attitude, that is what is honor. That is the hold that tradition has.
Well, I'm Ramesh. I just wanted to add to what you said now, madam, that there are certain specific recipes available for each of these temples. For example, in the case of Uppaliyappan temple, without uppu, you will be served the prasadam, which becomes naivedyam when it is offered to the Lord, kind of a thing. And I got an information that a person from an Indian a techie who went over to America, made a lot of money, has now come back to Srirangam temple, and he is doing his service for the rest of his lifetime by doing the prasadam exclusively for the Lord, by following the old techniques to the T. And that's how he is dedicating himself, kind of a thing. And so there are certain procedures there, and it is tough, it is very rigorous, and he loves doing it, and he wants to preserve that particular technique in that particular temple. So like that, there are certain strict procedures are available, which is being done in various temples, and I am sure that, as rightly told by you, over a period of time, certain things may get diluted over a period of time, but certain techies like him are coming back to the roots. No, it's all God's will, and it's all happening.
Yeah.
Written recipes or?
No, he's
Oral recipe transferred from generation to generation. Even Vedas is not a written stuff. It has been, it is basically apaurishayam. It has been captured by the seer called Rishi, who has got it into himself. He told it to a few people, and they told to a few people. Like that it happened. And now only in the last 200 years or so, we have got this parchment and paper written down. And in the last 150 years, we have got this paper printed. And now we have got Kindle.
I think I'm just curious. You have in these temples, do you have families who kind of,
Yeah. So in Palani, I met a man, he said, Nan vandu Miras Pandaram. I hadn't heard of that. I said, what do you do? He said, nightla we read the accounts to the god. I said, what does that mean? He said, we go near Muruga and we tell him, Iniki 50,000 rupees vandadu undi illa. And so to imagine that Muruga cares and to read to him every night is bhavane. So that is, but to your point, sir, I think each of us is in some parts traditionalist and in some parts progressive, and Priya will have her balance of how Bharatanatyam should evolve and how it should remain. Now if you ask me for saris, all these light Kanjipurams don't do nothing for me, don't do anything for me. I think that Murukku, that threefold thread, the heavy ones are, so, but you ask me about women's education and why can't temple have more women involved? I'll say yes, that should be the progress, but you will disagree. So this is as a society, I think the balance that we all have to strike is a very delicate one, don't you think?
Yeah. Do you have hereditary cooks in all these temples?
Yes.
So it's done only by them, is it? So perhaps that's one of the...
Yeah. In the Jagannath Puri temple, the Suwaras, which are a tribal group, are involved in that, and you can't enter the kitchen. So it is all by families.
So nobody from the outside
I couldn't
can
see
enter.
the temple. Couldn't see.
Even in Thiruvananthapuram and...
where is Sudhakar? So the Thiruvananthapuram, the Unniyappams I was allowed to see. The Ambalapura I was able to see. But I'd like you to show the Jagannath slides. There are 5 of them, so it's not very long. They don't allow non-outsiders into the kitchen.
Even to cook? I mean,
no, even to see. I had to
see.
stand and opposite side in the library and sort of peer. And they said that, and they said a very interesting thing. They said, if we believe even for one moment that it is us who are making this, the pots will shatter. We believe that Mahalakshmi is actually cooking the food, and you can hear her Golusachatam, the anklets. They call her Bimala Devi, but they won't allow you close to the kitchen, and it's very tantric. There is a 9, they do one 9-sided yantra, 9 pots, one on top of each other, using of firewood. So it's kind of slow cooking, and each level has dals, then rice, then vegetables. So it's very prescribed, but access is very difficult into this. I don't think, but yes. Hi, Raja.
So I thought I would come here only for a presentation, but to see with the two of you, it was like for me listening and hearing song and a dance together. So your conversation was really, really nice.
Can I introduce you to the audience?
Like how we have the GI tag for Tirupati Laddu, do you have any other kind of a GI tag for any, especially when you're saying it's so sacred, it's so special? Does any other dish from any other temple have any GI tag like that attached to it?
He creates perfumes for Christian Dior and others. He runs a company where, So one of my most amazing experiences was going to Madurai with him and seeing lotuses spread on the floor about the size of this auditorium and a parallel mallige spread on the floor. And he makes these scent essences, which are then bought up by the French fragrance houses. But to answer your question, would any of you know if any other...
because of the kind of business that is, I'm sorry for using that word, okay. Let me be a little decent by saying it is on account of the economics involved in that, that GI tag or whatever is being got. And now I understand that Kovilpatti, Kadala Mithai has got that tag, and so certain other dishes also will be getting into things, provided this mass production and the kind of revenue generation that happens when that thing kicks in, all these tags will come to our own Upama also after some time.
Yeah. Okay. Srivaliputtur Palgova has it? And okay.
Economics, ultimate.
But sir, what's wrong with claiming that? I think that...
Yeah, we should have done it wrong back, but now it is happening.
Yeah.
The water which is used in that place gives fragrance to the...
That's what they say, that Alagar Kovil Dose is from the Nupura Gangai, where...
There, pot is prepared, pot, mud pot. That is also the content of the flavor. Mud pot.
It gives the flavor, yes. Correct, yes.
Now, as a matter of adding to that,
yes, please, sir.
Ma'am, I want to know how did I have seen a lot of animal sacrifice in the Hinduism. How did it come?
So my reading of it is that originally I did a previous book on cows, and my reading of it was that the sacrifices happened because originally the human, they viewed themselves as the sacrifice. And then what happened was they did the Ashwamedha, the horse, and then the cows were sacrificed. And then what cows ate was sacrificed, which is why we have the Samagri, which is, so essentially it is a dilution of what is, in an Agnihotra, you offer yourself, but then people stop jumping into the fire. Then they said, okay, let's use animals as in our place. Then use cows in our place. Then use what the cows eat. So so animal sacrifices now happen in a few temples in the West Bengal belt, yes, Assam, but I saw it in Nepal. But now we use plants and seeds and bijas and all in our. So, but the sentiment is the same. As Priya said, it's an offering. So why not offer pori like Sudama did? So it is a...
Yeah.
Ordinarily you told the Ganga, one big fort is kept. Monthly once they give food to the public, offering food to the public. It is cooked in that platform, a big platform, big resort.
Yes, that I took a photo, yes. Yeah, I did.
A small question I have, madam, since you are it.
One sec, sir, sorry. There was a question here.
One of the dichotomies I have lived with all my life is that I am, having grown up in South India, I've seen my North Indian friends when I lived in the North for a few years, they'll buy the peda from the shop outside, like even in Kalighat in Kolkata. They'll buy the peda, go just show it there and bring it home as a prasad. In my head, I'm a little snooty and think it is a prasad. This is like it's just bought in a shop.
Yes.
So, whereas in my house, when I cook, I will not ever touch the prasad. I will do it myself. But then I'll put milk and milk. So that's like my philosophy. So I always have this. But now with age, I'm saying, okay, that's also prasad maybe. When I was much younger, I used to say, no, this is not how prasad is done. You have to stand next to the stove and make it like all my mind hot shit. So have you struggled with this ever? And visited so many different temples of different states.
That's what they say, that the word they use is prayatnam, which is why do we go and... the commonest question that an 18-year-old asked, and I have asked it, is why go to a temple to see God? Isn't God supposed to be everywhere? Why can't I stay at home? What is the whole point of all this? But the answer usually given is, unless you do some prayatnam, there is not going to be the reward. And I think you being able to cook with your own hands and offering is a prayatnam, which I don't have the capacity to do.
People say, Ma, look at that, it's so practical,
Yeah.
Struggling all morning to do this. My 22-year-old, this is the comment I would get. That's the important.
Do you
I
have
think
an
that
answer?
shortcut seems to be an easy solution. No? So I think that's.
22-year-old will say, why is it not yet on Swiggy?
Lastly, we want is Swiggy for this.
Why the prayer before the God? In Vrindavan, simply, when you see the darshan of the Vrindavan, the ornaments and bells, which one is the God, reflects the power, the person who is before the God.
Yes.
That vibration.
I agree. So to Priya's question, why go to temples? Because the Garbhagraham is supposed to have a metal plate underneath it which attracts the vibrations. And I believe that communal prayer has an energy that you cannot get perhaps at home. There are many paths, solitary, you need solitude to pray, but don't dismiss going to a temple and don't dismiss the jostling in it. Because if you believe in this, now energy healing is a big word, and if you believe in energies and absorption, and Priya raises the world to transcendence with just energy, then going in a group and feeling that energy, what's wrong with that?
Thank you so much, Shoba. Any more questions? Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Sticking to the spirit of faith, I was just thinking maybe these two ladies were sisters in their previous lives. The conversation, the way they went with the elan with they conducted themselves, and how this whole evening went about in about 1 hour plus was amazing. Thank you very, very much. There are several events where it's packed halls. There are some events where there are less people, but the kind of involvement, the kind of questions, and the kind of engagement of the audience, fabulous. Thank you very much to the audience for being active and engaged. And Shoba and Priya, fantastic evening. Thank you so much. The kind of effort you both have taken to put this event together, really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Priya.